The original recording from which this radio program was taken has been lost. The text by Reverend D. Earl Cripe survives and is now read by Eric J. Miller. St. Matthew's Gospel is a search for Christ the King, which is, in turn, a search for the kingdom of God. It would seem unlikely that we could discuss the kingdom of God or its king in any meaningful way unless we know who God is. This, of course, is a demanding subject. Volumes have been written, as everyone knows, on the doctrines of God. Unless we are to go out to sea and never get back to shore, we must define this subject insofar as our study is concerned. We will not go into an in-depth examination, but we will say simply that we intend to give a useful explanation from the historic Orthodox Christian perspective. It will necessarily be limited, for no man can possibly be so presumptuous as to suppose that he can define God infinitely and exhaustively. Some of our observations will be objective and some will be subjective. Let us think first about the objective side. God is Elohim, the Almighty, ever-existent creator and ruler of this universe and all things that exist beyond and before it. He is the owner of all things by merit of having created them. God is Jehovah, the life and the giver of life. He is the one who has life within himself. He is the maker of the covenants. He made the Adamic covenant. Quote, Elohim said, "Let us make man in our own image and after our own likeness." Unquote. Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. But, quote, Jehovah Elohim formed man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. Unquote. Genesis chapter 2, verse 7. The Creator formed him, but the Giver of life breathed life into him and made the covenant of life with him. God is El Shaddai, mighty on behalf of his people. He provides for and protects them. This he does not only with his love and compassion, but with his power and wisdom. Whether or not they know him, the people of God are completely and perfectly provided for, both now and in the eternity to come. This word, as it is often said, also means the breasted one. God's people have a place of refuge and repose. There is not only security, but comfort in God. God is Adon, the Lord over his people. This is not the Lord in the sense of the giver of life as in Jehovah, but the overlord, the master and the ruler. Natural man sometimes thinks of this as a harsh and unattractive role. Just the opposite is true. This is a great ministry of grace and mercy to the people of God. He is greatly to be praised for taking that responsibility over us. He plans it for us, he keeps us in line, he corrects us, he instructs us, he trains us. He makes sure that our lives are well spent and that we grow up with eternal achievements and accomplishments. Numerous times in the Bible, the greatness, all-inclusive power, wisdom, creative genius, and love of God is summed up in the name El. This is the Hebrew word for the, but it is not just any the. This is the ultimate the life, the truth, the power, the wisdom, the love, the source, the first cause. It does not just mean the God, the Lord, the giver of life, or the breasted one. It means all of these and more. It means the ultimate the. God is the beginning of all, the originator of all, the administrator of all, the evaluator of all, the judge of all. Everything came from him. Everything references him. Whatever concept you wish to name, life, freedom, truth, legality, morality, value, being, justice, knowledge, It all comes back to God and only has meaning in reference to God. This is the historic Orthodox Christian view of God, and that is the objective side of my little discourse on whom God is. Out of the historical period known as the Enlightenment, a new and very popular theology began to spread and gain wide acceptance. It is still popular today, and many mistake it for orthodoxy, though it is not. It had its roots in the Enlightenment and took its creed from the Age of Reason. For want of a more specific name, it is called Evangelical Conservative Theology. Now, do not confuse this term with evangelism, evangelicalism, or conservative theology. The Orthodox Church has always been evangelical, conservative, and fundamental in its doctrine. Evangelical conservatism is the title given to this new theology that changed forever the way many of God's people look at truth, the Bible, and God. Evangelical conservative theology has a motto: "A reasonable God can be known by reason, as reasonable man observes a reasonable universe." To the evangelical conservative, there are certain things that are true whether or not God exists. Francis Schaeffer would have called these true truths. An example would be this: 2 and 2 is 4. To the New Age of Reason theology, that is a mathematical fact. It has nothing to do with whether or not God exists. It is just an empirical fact, that is all. Another would be: all liquids known to man contract and get heavier when they freeze, except water, which expands, gets lighter, and floats to the top. This is true because it is true. It has nothing to do with the existence of God. We can take these facts that exist around us and build a reasonable case for the Bible. This is called scientific apologetics. The same thing can be done with philosophy, archaeology, and so on. Then we can logically expect reasonable men to accept the Bible and the truth. To historic Christian orthodoxy, this is all wrong. Everything starts with God. 2 and 2 is only 4 if God exists and says that it is 4. No one can know truth until he first accepts by faith the fact of God. That is because nothing is before God, nothing proves God, nothing explains God, nothing justifies God, and nothing logically leads man to God. It is impossible. It cannot happen. If it could, then we would have dualism. There would be something apart from God and outside of God that could objectively analyze God, explain God, and sit in judgment of God. Anyone who believes that, for whatever reason, does not believe in the God of the Bible. Quote, "In the beginning, God." Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. That is it. That is the beginning. That is where it all begins, and all things come from that beginning. This is not just the mincing of words or the arguing with a theological concept with which one does not agree. It is the laying of the only foundation on which any true and useful knowledge of God's King and God's kingdom can be built. This is vital and it is urgent. We could start somewhere else, from which point of departure we could eventually get around to talking about God and the kingdom of God. But it would not be El, and it would not be His kingdom. It will be a God of our own making and a kingdom of our own liking. It matters little what you call it. It will be wrong and it will be misleading. Eventually it will lead to man's demise. That is why God warned Adam and Eve not to go to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil to try to pass scientific, rational, and experimental judgment on God and His truth. Truth can never originate in, nor can it be judged by, the mind of the creature, even if that mind is not fallen, as Eve's was not when she made that fateful decision. All that comes from that approach is the lie that leads to darkness and ultimately death. We are searching here for the kingdom. In order to find it, we must start with the God. When we ask this question, we could be talking in the finite sense. We could be asking, what is a king, like the King of England? That might or might not be a useful and profitable study, but it would not help us here in our quest. We are not interested in what a king on the limited, feeble, and partial level of fallen mortality might be. We do not care to find out about kings by studying time and history. We do not care here about a king in the political, sociological, anthropological sense. We want to know about the word king and its origin. What does the word mean in the ultimate sense? A king is a sovereign. He has power, wisdom, and authority. He not only controls because he has the office, but because he is a king in the moral, ethical, legal, and spiritual sense. He has the right to rule. The kingdom belongs to him. He has the moral character and force. He deserves to rule. He has the power. He can rule. He has the authority. He may rule. He has the wisdom. He knows how to rule. He has the power of life and death. A sovereign can take life, and he can give it. This is why no mere mortal can ever be a king in the ultimate sense. He has no power to give life. In Ezekiel chapter 21, verses 27 through 28, God said that only Messiah had the right to be king over God's people. In 1 Samuel chapter 8, verse 7, God told the prophet that he was the king over his people, but they rejected his rulership. And then it is equally unlikely that we will be very successful and informative in our search for the king and his kingdom unless we understand what a kingdom is. You may think that this is utterly simple, but if modern philosophy, science, education, government, and religion are any indication, I must tell you that there is no subject about which men, particularly in our times, are more confused. We will not waste precious time and space to talk about what a kingdom is not. We want to look at what a kingdom is. First of all, there has to be a king in order for there to be a kingdom. In the kingdoms of this world, that king does not and cannot have absolute authority. He has to have limitations. Maybe it is a censoring body. Maybe it is the extent of his moral and intellectual capacities. Eventually, of course, his inability to go on living will be the greatest limitation. Whatever it is, each mortal king is limited so that he cannot be thought of as sovereign in the absolute sense. But to have a king in the ultimate sense, you must have a sovereign with no limitations as to power, authority, or longevity. If he does not have absolute power, he is not a king in the sense that we are looking for. And then a kingdom is a realm. There has to be a territory, be it real estate, government, morals, philosophy, or what have you, that comprises the boundaries of the kingdom. In the finite world of mortals, all such realms are limited by something. But in the ultimate sense, there can be no limitations to realm, or there is no kingdom. The ultimate kingdom comprehends all territory. There have to be laws for there to be a kingdom. In the world of men, those rules may take many shapes and be administered in many ways. They may be vague and general rules that are scarcely applied, or they may be narrow and legalistic rules that are rigidly and cruelly applied. In the ultimate kingdom, the rules must be complete, absolute, and precise so that the subjects of the kingdom can know what they are and what they mean. You have to have government to have a kingdom. There must be a structure by which the kingdom is administered, or there is no kingdom. There has to be a bar of justice in order for there to be a kingdom. A kingdom cannot exist in anarchy. The kingdom of darkness is not a kingdom at all in the legitimate sense. It is a counter-kingdom, anti-kingdom, and a non-kingdom. In the ultimate kingdom, there must be ultimate justice. There must be subjects, or there is no kingdom. A king cannot exist unless there are those over which the king rules. In the ultimate kingdom, these must be willing subjects. This would necessarily mean that those subjects must have choice. For there to be choice, the king and the kingdom must be presented, and the subject must accept both with the whole of his being. Otherwise, there is no subjection, and ultimately, since a subject must be willing, there is no subject. A king who is a tyrant and a kingdom that is a prism is neither king nor kingdom in the infinite sense. A subject who is a rebel is not a subject in the final sense. A rebel does not want to be ruled by a true king, nor does he choose to exist in a true kingdom. A king in the ultimate sense does not want a rebel in his kingdom, nor can he allow a rebel in his kingdom. If he did, both king and kingdom would not and could not exist in the ultimate sense for which we are looking in this study. We could go on about kings and kingdoms, but the point of this has been to give the listener some sense of what we are searching for in this study. We are looking for God the King, and for the kingdom over which he rules and reigns. More specifically, we are looking for the kingdom of God in time and history. We are looking for the kingdom of God in eternity, and for the present correlation that makes this relevant to us here and now. There are many things to know, but there are some things with which we must start, or our search will be in vain. We must start with God as the absolute sovereign. In the ultimate sense, the two titles are inseparable. The king is the God, and the God is the king. Apart from him, there is nothing. And since heaven is, and in the legitimate context can only be, the throne of God the King, the kingdom of God and the kingdom of heaven are inseparable terms. The kingdom of heaven speaks of the realm, and the kingdom of God speaks of the sovereign, but it is, because it has to be, the same kingdom. If it were otherwise, there would neither be a kingdom of heaven nor a kingdom of God in the legitimate sense. If the kingdom of God and the kingdom of heaven are two different realms, then there are of necessity two different sovereigns, which means there is no the king or the kingdom. And while there may be different programs and different phases of that king and kingdom in time and history, in order to acquaint those who are willing to be subjects of the king and his kingdom with what it is and how it is entered, if there is a God, there can only be one king. And if there is a heaven, there can only be one kingdom. The truth concerning this kingdom is revealed by the words of the king, because he is the absolute and ultimate sovereign. His word is the absolute authority and truth. This word concerns the king, his kingdom, and his plan for bringing subjects into it. Because he is the king, and his is the kingdom, that plan cannot and will not fail. But because he is dealing with willing subjects to whom he has given free moral agency, their plans and ideas concerning a king and a kingdom can and must fail. This will provide the crisis for the honest man to see the contrast between the truth of the tree of life and the lie of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and make the unforced and willful choice to submit to the king and become a subject of his kingdom. This enormous plan, which is simple in its proposition but varies in the way the king has worked it out, is written down for us by the finger of God so that all men who wish to know can find out about it in an inerrant and inspired book. Because it is the book of the king and the kingdom, it has been quite accurately and inevitably titled the book, or the Bible, which means the book. The ultimate and infinite king, in order to convey to man the truth about the ultimate and infinite kingdom, has written the ultimate and infinite book. At the end of it, the author, the king, set his signature by issuing the warning to any who would be foolish enough to try to change his book of plagues too numerous and too terrible to countenance here. In spite of the irreverent attacks by fools, humanists, defectors, and traitors through the centuries, the old book stands, and in it the truth is preserved for those of honest minds who are more interested in that truth than religion, and the approval of God than the acceptance of peers. It, and it alone, can tell us how it started, where we came from and why, what happened and when, what God has done to correct the problem, and what we must do to participate in the solution. There is no truth apart from God. There is no other source of truth in this world than the Bible, and it is not revealed any other way than through the Bible. All who will be in harmony with God will love Him with all their soul, spirit, body, and mind. They will abide in His kingdom, obey His laws, and seek to be holy as He is holy. Curiosity seekers cannot discover God or His kingdom. Seeking Him with a whole and an honest heart has always been a requirement for finding the King and His kingdom. There are a number of ways that we could characterize human history. We could say that it is the story of creation. We might call it the story of the fall of mankind. We could label it the story of recreation. We might call it the story of redemption. Of these, this last title would be the most all-inclusive and comprehensive. In time and history, redemption has gone through many stages of development. Every Orthodox Christian, whether or not he is a dispensationalist, recognizes numerous dispensations: the Adamic, the Noahic, the Abrahamic, the Mosaic, the Davidic, the dispensation of Christ's earthly ministry, and the church, at least. God, at diverse times and in sundry manners, has worked with men in this world. But there is one great theme of history that takes precedent over all others, and that is the kingdom of God. Did this kingdom of God exist in the Garden of Eden? Did it exist in Noah's day, in Abraham's, in David's? Does it exist today? Can we find that kingdom? Can we know what it means? The answer to all of these questions are yes. But be prepared to be patient and to remember what we are looking for as we go along in this study of St. Matthew and the other Gospels. It is a study of the King and the kingdom, and the study of the kingdom of God in time and history is a study of redemption. The kingdom as such was not always visible, particularly in the early stages of the Bible, but redemption and its outworking was. And so, in St. Matthew, we shall learn about the kingdom, the plan of redemption, and how it was, and is, being worked out by God in this world. There is an aspect of the kingdom that goes beyond the final outworking of redemption in time and history. We will talk about that in the latter stages of this study. Jesus said, quote, "The kingdom of heaven is like unto a merchantman seeking goodly pearls, who, when he had found one pearl of great price, went and sold all that he had and bought it." Unquote. Matthew chapter 13, verses 45 through 46. Quote, "If thou seekest her as silver, and searchest for her as for hid treasures, then shalt thou understand the fear of the Lord, and find the knowledge of God." Unquote. Proverbs chapter 2, verses 4 and 5. If the prize is worth the investment to you, the answers are here. Follow along with us and you will see for yourself. Read more at godspointofview.com. A copy of this book is available from Amazon in Kindle and paperback format. Link in the description.